Hey, Tony here. I'm here with another Tony, Tony Keefe from Sugar Creek Honey Farm, and we're checking out his honey operation here now, and have some questions for Tony. Um, can you tell us what is the difference between honey and granulated sugar, health-wise?
Well, so our honey is not processed. So when we take our sugar and harvest it, or when we take our honey and harvest it, we take it straight from what the bees bring in, how they put moisture into the hive to transfer it from nectar into honey, and then when it's done and ready to be harvested, they put a wax coating over every cell that's ready to go. So what we do is we cut the top of the cells off, the wax, and we melt it down and we reuse it on our other frames, and then we spin the honey straight from the hive, and it goes right into the bottle that we sell and give to our customers. So it's straight from nectar sources such as flowering trees. We plant a lot of clover seeds, and we plant wildflowers, and we have a garden. So right now there's not a lot of nectar sources. But you'll see some yellow flowers kind of off in the back. They look like weeds. They call that goldenrod.
Oh yeah, we make goldenrod tea.
Yep, right now they're on the goldenrod, both for pollen to get them ready for winter. Right now we're already thinking about winter.
Right.
So right now they're collecting pollen and nectar from that source.
Yeah.
So it's completely different from sugar. This is pure, raw, natural, straight from the flower, produced by the bee into a jar.
A lot healthier for you. With your honey operation, like you said, you're planting wildflowers, and so you pretty much know what kind of nectar they're getting it from. I mean, sometimes there's an apple orchard, and the main thing is that the bees are pollinating the other plants, so that's something that you don't get from pure cane sugar either.
Right.
People with an apple orchard are doing it to pollinate their trees.
Yep.
And then doesn't the honey get a different flavor if it's like all clover or?
Absolutely. So the honey that I had last year, we didn't produce very much because it was my first year beekeeping. So the honey we got last year was really light. This year, and I'll show you a bottle, our honey's a lot darker, and that's going to be really clover-based honey. And when we started with one hive with the hopes of just having a better garden, and we do have some fruit trees. So our original plan was to just pollinate the stuff that we have, and then that first year when we got honey, we're like, this is pretty good.
Yeah.
And then we realized, oh, well, we can make a little bit of money off of it. So our intention to start the project, or to start beekeeping, was one, because it was interesting, and two, we needed the pollination for our garden. But yeah, people have different fields set up. So like this year, or this next year, this whole field, you can see I've already started to tear it up.
Yep.
Kind of like a deer plot. This will all be clover next year. All the white Dutch clover.
Yeah.
And that's mainly what we got this year.
Awesome. So where are you currently marketing, selling your honey at?
So right now, family and friends. Usually, I just sold, I think, 3 or 4 bottles to work buddies that I work with. People who have donated. Like I had somebody help purchase my extractor. I upgraded from a 2-frame to a 4-frame, so that person got some free honey. And usually it's just family and friends right now until we go through all the state of Iowa business licensing and getting all the fees paid and becoming an actual business.
Yeah.
Right now it's just kind of still in a hobby form, but usually, the little bit of money we'll make this year, it's going to go right back into it because we'll buy more bees next spring.
Yeah. Some Iowa farmers have a real tendency to overuse pesticides.
Correct.
How does that impact an operation like yours?
So one thing that's nice about Iowa is that when you can register your beehives online, and that information gets sent directly to sellers of pesticides. So for instance, my hives are all registered with the state of Iowa, and that information is given to the Donaldson elevator, which they have a list of all the beehives. And so if the wind is blowing in the direction of a beehive, they can't apply that day. Now there are some that hire outside applicators, like if you're bigger farmers, and we don't have any necessarily directly in our area, but there are bigger farmers that maybe don't check that because they get all of their pesticides or they contract it out, and then if they spray and it dusts over, they can wipe out an entire colony.
Yeah, and that's devastating. What other kind of things can impact your honeybee in that your colony in that way?
So, like one thing right here that and I don't know if you can be able to see this, but like this hive is really full of bees, and that's why they're kind of swarming around the outside, and you can kind of see them flying up in the air. I don't know if this hive is getting ready to swarm on me or not, which means they've run out of room the queen has run out of room to lay eggs. So one of the detriments that causes you to lose a hive is your bees leave you. They swarm and take half the colony with them, and they do it to themselves. Now, good beekeeping management requires me to put another box on the top part of that hive, which I planned on doing today anyhow. It might be a little too late. They might swarm. Hopefully, if they do swarm, they land on a branch on a nearby tree that's within height, and then all I have to do is get another box, put it underneath the tree, shake it, and they all go in the box, and we start over with a new queen, and then I have 2 colonies. Aside from that, mice, when it gets cold out, mice make nests in the bottom because the bee population will dwindle at the beginning of winter. The life cycle of a bee is 40 days, so every 40 days they die, and new bees hatch every 21 days. So there's a life cycle there that they have to perpetually get into.
Yeah.
So if there's not a queen laying eggs, and bees are dying in 40 days, they kind of do it to themselves. So you have to keep mice out. Small hive beetle. It's not as big of a problem with my local hives. If I've gotten swarms or colonies out of houses that I've cut out, a lot of small hive beetle, and they just take residence inside the cells. And if there's not enough bees to fight them out, they can take over. Wax moths lay eggs, and their larvae will eat through the honey and tear up the wax. And then the varroa mite is the worst thing for a hive, probably worse than pesticides in our area, because the bees go out, land on flowers, and I would say the mite to a bee is like a tick that doesn't get taken off. And what they do is they lay eggs, and they get into baby eggs, and they grow through the life cycle of the adult, and eventually they eat the wings off of small bees, and they can't go anywhere. Once they come out of their life cycle, once they hatch, they automatically go into a nurse bee, and then they become a worker bee and a guard bee, and they have all these different job functions throughout their life. So making sure that cycle stays by getting rid of varroa mites, small hive beetle, wax moths, and mice. Those are your big 4.
For those people that don't know, generally, and correct me if I'm wrong, but generally a hive has 1 female, the queen, and the rest are males. Is that correct?
No. So there's 1 queen. All of the bees in the hive, like all of the bees in this hive right now, are all female.
Oh.
The drones are the males.
Okay.
They're quite a bit bigger, and their only job in life is to mate with a queen.
Oh, wow.
Once they mate with a queen, they're done. They die. So drones in a hive, they don't help with honey. They don't help in keeping the hive cool in the summer. They don't bring in water to keep it cool and cool and damp to keep the humidity up in there so the honey can ferment. but all of these bees are all girls, and they can all lay eggs. But if they lay eggs, they all become male bees. Only the queen can lay worker, nurse, and guard bee eggs.
So this may be getting ready to swarm, in which case you have to divide some of that and move it into an empty box like this one. Is that correct?
So if this activity was happening in the spring, like in May or June, I would definitely I would take one box off, move it to another location, and the hive that I take off, I'd make sure there's eggs left behind, and those bees would raise. They would pick an egg, and they would decide if that egg was going to become a queen or not in the first 3 days of that egg life cycle, and then they build their own. They feed an egg or a young larvae differently than any other bee, and they feed queens. It's called royal jelly, which is something that they produce when they eat, and it's made out of what's called bee bread, which is a mixture of pollen and honey and anything else that they can excrete into a food source that goes into developing one queen.
And honey, a lot of people would describe honey as a superfood itself.
Absolutely.
Because of the nutrition and the calories and everything else that goes along with it.
And one thing I learned during my first year beekeeping is they say if you eat local natural honey, it actually helps your immune system and allergies for that area, because the honey you're eating is coming off of those things that produce some of those irritants for your system.
Is there any truth to, I've heard people say that young children shouldn't have unpasteurized honey. Is there any truth to that? Or?
Not that I've read. No, I mean, I haven't done a lot of research in what the difference is. I mean, my kids eat the honey that I produce.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't eat a lot of it because it is very, very sweet. But as far as unfiltered, I haven't read anything. My wife uses it for tea, and coffee, and all the girls from work use it in their coffee. So I haven't heard of any negative side effects